This is episode 38 with Amanda Rivera.
Welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, the show that empowers you to become the hero of your life's journey. With your host, Brian Tier.
Hey guys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, episode 38 today, and I'm very excited to be speaking to none other than Amanda Rivera. Now, Amanda is an influencer and PR coach for millennial entrepreneurs, and after the death of a loved one, Amanda started asking herself if what she was doing really mattered. Through a series of subsequent events, she fell into the world of entrepreneurship and hasn't looked back. She's gone on to work with some major publications and rubbed shoulders with some of the top public figures and leaders of today. And in our interview, Amanda shares how you can do the same. Amanda's also the host of the incredibly popular Millennial Thought Leaders Mastermind Facebook group, a place for the next generation of influencers and thought leaders to hang out and support each other in their own journeys. In this interview, you're going to learn how Amanda transitioned from a corporate job to working for herself, how to connect with high-level influencers, why the people you hang out with are crucial to your success, how to start upgrading your network, and how to let go of negative relationships. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in this episode at briantier.com/038. But for now, let's go hang out with Amanda. Welcome back, everyone, and a big welcome to today's guest. I'm speaking to Amanda Rivera. Amanda, thank you for coming on the Quarter Life Comeback.
Yeah, thank you for having me here.
Yeah, no, we connected through your awesome Facebook group, which I'm sure we'll hook up and speak about later. But for people listening, why don't you tell us a bit about your quarter life journey and, a bit about Amanda?
Yeah, sure. So like I said before, thank you for having me here on the podcast. I love what you're up to. I love the work that you're doing for millennials. And it's like my journey has been kind of crazy. So I definitely feel like I've gone through a quarter life crisis in like my own experiences as well. So I can definitely relate with your audience and where they're at on the journey right now. Like I said, just starting out, I originally did not plan on becoming an entrepreneur. I was going to follow the whole like Mad Men, working at a New York ad agency. I have a master's in corporate PR, so that was kind of the trajectory for my life. And entrepreneurship kind of fell into my life after going through a really deep quarter life crisis in my own life.
And do you mind sharing a bit about what that looked like?
Yeah. So when I was in my master's program, I was 22 at the time. I was working for this woman who wasn't really paying me properly. Like my parents were going through a really nasty divorce at the time. And I started an inspiration blog in November 2012. And as a way to like just heal and just to really write about like everything that was going on in my family life. And literally a month after, in like December 2012, my cousin, who I was really close to, she was 24 at the time. She ended up dying within 3 days and passing away from meningitis. And a week later, the Newtown shootings happened in Connecticut. So I'm from Connecticut. So everything all happened at once. And what that experience made me realize, it kind of did a 180 in my life. So I was on one trajectory. I was going to follow the corporate route. I was going to follow the 9-to-5 route. I was going to follow like get a job, get a partner, get an apartment, get married, have kids, that whole route. And it changed me, that whole experience. And I remember at her funeral, like asking myself, God forbid, I was 22. God forbid if I was to die at 24, did I live a full and expansive life? And at the time, I couldn't say that. And so that experience made me really dive deeper into what was meaningful in my life and made me really question, am I giving back in a really powerful way? And that inspiration blog I started was my healing process. I never thought of becoming an entrepreneur off of it. It was just the way for me to just get what was like on my heart out there. And I just had this idea, like, if I'm going through this, maybe someone else is going through this, and maybe I just want them to know that they're not alone. And I wrote one article just on entrepreneurship, just on the ideas that I was having around it. And this guy read it and he ended up becoming an entrepreneur from it. And he started his own like Amazon business, like doing drop shipping. And now he's making like 10K a month doing that business. Yeah. And he travels. His favorite place is like Las Vegas. So he travels to Las Vegas all the time. And he told me like that one article made me get off my ass and do this. And so that made me realize, I'm like, holy shit, I think there's something to this. I think this is where this like whole online scene, maybe there's something here for me. And I battled with that for a long time because I was like, I got a master's, I got to use it, but I feel like God and the universe really stepped into that space for me at that time, especially because I remember applying to all these marketing agencies and right after I graduated, which was in 2013, and I could not get a job for the life of me. Like I applied everywhere and like nobody was hiring. And so at the time I was like, okay, I could either like go get a waitressing job and like just try and make it work, or, why don't I just go find my own clients and just jump into entrepreneurship and make it happen?
I love that.
And that's what I ended up doing.
I love that. Just a quick question. Is that article still live?
Nope. It was on my old inspiration blog, like inspiremecafe.com, which I took down because I've been transitioning.
I was hoping I could hook it up in the show notes, but no worries. And thank you. And thank you so much for sharing that story. I could hear it touched you, and a lot of people speak about having a near-death experience and learning from that. I know like Brendan Bouchard is that kind of example. But for you, it was slightly different. It was like the death of a very close relative. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And just so that we're clear, we're not telling people it's like quit your day job now and go do something. Like if, like you said, it was, am I making a difference or am I living a meaningful life? Like for some people that might be in a corporate job. So, don't all just go quit your jobs now.
Oh yeah. Like, and I completely get, if where you're coming from on that point too, because I didn't want to become an entrepreneur. I wanted more stability in my life. Like I wanted the 9 to 5. I wanted it so bad. And for whatever reason, like I just couldn't get it. And looking back, I see why, because like what I'm doing now is so much more for my personal heart than if I was in a corporate scene. And I know that there's other people who are just like so in love with working 9 to 5, and that's their flow, that's their bliss. And if that's your flow and that's your bliss, don't ever feel pressure entrepreneurship just because it's like the hot trend right now.
Yeah, I think it's a really dangerous thing. I was telling this to Jacob Sokol, my mentor and coach, and I said to him, it's kind of like quit your job and go travel is becoming like the buzzword now, and it's a really dangerous place to be in. Especially like a large portion of my audience who are unhappy in their jobs. It's like it seems like a quick fix, but it causes a lot of stress and problems if you don't go about it in the right way. So it's cool to hear that you've kind of transitioned into working for yourself. And what did that transition look like? Like what were those first steps from the more sort of 9 to 5?
Yeah. So, it started out with doing a lot of free work to build my portfolio. So just like going to different like coffee shops and saying, I'll run your social media. I'll do it. And I'll do it for free because I need to build up my portfolio. But I ended up getting my first real paying client from a lie, actually. So, one of my good friends, she
I
was
hope
like
they're listening to this.
Yes. Oh yeah. So she she was a social media manager, and she also did like freelance work, and she was doing like social media, plus she said she would do the WordPress website edits for this woman, one of her clients. And she thought WordPress was going to be like real easy, like a drag and drop type website builder, like a Squarespace. Little did she know, self-hosted WordPress.org sites are much different than that. And she ended up calling me one night, just like crying, like bawling her eyes out. And she's like, Amanda, I told this woman that I could do these edits to her WordPress site. Like, I don't even know like what's going on in this dashboard right now. And because I had my own inspiration blog at the time, I built that site on WordPress.org. I self-taught myself WordPress, all of it. I was always like, yeah, like, you know, when you're a budding entrepreneur, you're doing a lot of stuff DIY, especially in the beginning. And so I was like, okay, what's the issue? What needs to get fixed? And it was something with the comment section that needed to be tweaked. So I ended up fixing it that night. The next day, like she ends up telling the woman that was her client, and she just ended up confessing to her. She was like, I didn't fix that on your website. My friend Amanda did. And the woman ended up being the celebrity recovery coach. So this woman was featured on A&E TV. She had her own show there. So the show was called Relapse. She's been featured in the New York Times, Toronto Star. Like and her whole circle, she like hangs out with Terry Cole, Marie Forleo, Gabby Bernstein. So this was like a really big client. And so I kind of understand where my friend was coming from, was like, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. And so Patty ends up reaching out to me and was like, wow, like I hired an agency to fix that. And in 2 weeks, they couldn't fix that. And you do that in under 24 hours. And so from there, I ended up working with her for like, I want to say like a year and a half, just doing whatever she needed, like her website stuff. I ended up eventually doing some of her social media stuff. And that's what started me into. So I transitioned out of Inspire Me Cafe into Inspire Me Communications, which was my digital marketing agency.
Nice. Cool. I definitely, I mean, we touched on sort of relationships there, and like influences. So I definitely want to get into that in the crux of this interview. But before I do, like you've worked since then, you've worked with pretty big clients and publications. Did you ever have this, this feeling of like, who am I to be doing this, or who am I to be working with these big brands or anything like that?
Here's where it ended up happening. So on one hand, I see people as people. Like everybody eats shits, says all of that. They're just people, right? Like it's I don't get starstruck. But on the flip side, I had a lot of self-trust issues and a lot of worthiness issues.
Yeah.
So it was very easy for me. So while I was doing all this digital marketing stuff on the side, you know, I was starting to like make friends with like different influencers, just because I'm like a really friendly and bubbly person. And I'm just like very blunt. Like I'll reach out to someone if I feel there's a connection. I don't care how many followers they have, and I'll just start, and I'll ask them. I'll be like, hey, you want to hop on a Skype call? Like, I love the content you just shared, and like I just posted something about that on my own stuff. Like I feel like we would become BFFs. And like I just and like looking back on that, I'm like, that's kind of ballsy, but whatever. Yeah. And yeah, so like that's how I've made a lot of my influencer connections, is just like just being so interested in people and like wanting to get to know more about them. But what I noticed, and for years, was I was always promoting everyone else's stuff. So I would be like, oh my gosh, you got to meet this because I had just met the editor-in-chief of Millennial Magazine, and then I had just met the editor-in-chief of GenWise.com. And I was like, oh my gosh, you two need to meet each other. So I like set up that high-level collaboration between those two women. And I was doing like all these like high-level collaborations like behind the scenes while I was working on my other businesses. And I was like, oh my gosh, you should meet this podcast host, and you should meet this Forbes columnist, and all this different stuff. But I was doing it, like I said, for everyone else, but not for me, because I didn't feel that I had enough followers, or I didn't feel that I had enough influence for me to be featured in that way.
Yeah, it's funny as you speaking about this. It's kind of the same way that I've sort of gone about growing my brand and my podcast. It's like a lot of people can feel like with social media and the internet, it's easy for people to be put on pedestals and look like really intimidating to get in touch with. But at the same time, because of social media and stuff, it's so much easier to reach out to people, and you don't even need to be like, the traditional, like if someone was starstruck and they saw, I don't know, like, one of my big inspirations is Robin Sharma. Like if you saw Robin Sharma at a networking event, you'd be like, oh, there's no ways I'm going to go speak to him.
Yeah.
But like, it's so easy today to kind of hide behind an email or Twitter and be like, hey, Robin, I really love your stuff. Keep it up. And that's it. And then you're like, well, that's done. And now, the worst thing that can happen is he's seen your name in his inbox. But it's a lot easier than people might think to reach out to people who you admire. So yeah, that was cool that you mentioned that. So I want to talk about the power of relationships and community and everything else we said we'd speak about in this interview. Could you maybe dive into that a bit and why it is so important?
Yeah, definitely. So how I view it, I really do feel that what shifted my business, what shifted my mindset, what shifted everything in my life was the people I surrounded myself with. So while I was networking with all these people and doing these high level collaborations and connections, I started like hanging around with higher and higher level people. And I don't say that like status wise, I say it mindset wise, because when you start to get a certain level of success in your life, you have like this way different mindset and way different belief system on what's possible in the world, right? And so I was seeing people that were my age or even younger, like writing their own books, getting featured in Vice magazine, getting featured in Forbes. I was seeing them doing like high level collaborations. Like I was, one of my first clients, Patty, she ended up becoming a mentor for me, and she just really warped my mind around what was possible in the world. And so she helped me get focused on like what I needed to do to like break the glass ceiling of becoming, to head on the path of becoming more known and influential in my space. And if it wasn't for those people that I was surrounding myself with, I would still be thinking like everybody I went to high school and college with, which was, oh, you need to follow the same trajectory as everybody else is doing. And, oh, that's possible for like Oprah, or that's possible but for Marie Forleo, but for everybody else, like that just doesn't happen. And so because I was hanging out with people who were making these big shifts in their lives, I just saw it as possible. I was like, if they can do it, I know them personally. I know they're just as disorganized.
They still eating shit.
As everybody else. Like if they can do it, I can do it. And so that was like a major, major shift. And I know with every fiber of my being that if I wasn't surrounding myself with these high level influencers, that I would still be thinking small.
Yeah, I love that. So if someone's listening to this, how would you recommend they go about starting to find and interact with these sort of high level influencers? Or just just like positive people to be spending their time with?
Yeah, I think it's like multiple facets to it. So it's an internal mindset, and then it's an external showing of love. So if you've ever read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, I mean, definitely read that book. But in a nutshell, it boils down to this one concept, and it's you can get further in 2 months being interested in people than you can in 2 years getting other people interested in you. And so I live by that mantra. So I'm highly, highly curious about other people and what they're up to. And I want to serve and I want to love them and give them so much because I can do that because I'm an overflow of love in my own life, because I'm doing this inner work. I'm doing this forgiveness work. I'm elevating my mindset. I'm reading books that help transform my mindset around what's possible in the world. I'm listening to podcasts where I'm hearing all these leaders like talk about their stories and their journeys, and it's like transforming my mindset on what's possible. And so when you're doing that inner work and when you're doing that external work of showing showing your authentic self to people, that is so magnetic. That is so magnetic. And that's how you're able to connect with people who other people think it's impossible to connect with.
I love it. What are some of those books that you mentioned? Just a quick little side note here. Like, what are some good books?
Oh, okay. So, like I said before, How to Win Friends.
Maybe like the top 3. Yeah.
Okay. So, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways by Dr. Susan Jeffers. Such a good book. And in a nutshell, the main thing from that book is fear is just the limiting belief that you can't handle whatever's coming next. And so if you can get into the mindset that you can handle it, then you can overcome fear. And then the third one is Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear by Elizabeth Gilbert. And that whole book is just, it's just like nurturing for your creative soul and just saying, just freaking do it, put it out there. It's just the act of being creative, the action you take is going to transform your life.
I'm gonna interview her on one day.
Oh, you will.
So Amanda, we've spoken about like connecting with positive influences, but that also means that sometimes we're gonna have to let go of relationships that aren't serving us anymore, which is really, really hard. Could you maybe share a little bit about if you've had to deal with that and how to go about doing that in a constructive way?
Yeah. So a couple of things happen. So when you're on your path towards becoming your best self, your most authentic self, people are either going to meet you there. So they're going to be on their path towards becoming their best self, their most authentic self, or they're going to want to stay stagnant and try to keep the status quo. And what I tell my clients is, because a lot of times my clients will have like all this pain and emotional baggage around their childhood, around their families, and around their friends, and it's affecting their business. And what I tell them is, whenever you make a change in your life, you're not just changing your life, but you're changing other people's lives without their consent. And so people are going to get angry because their perspective of you has to change without their permission. So you don't have to go through life waiting for other people and their permission. It's not about that at all. But because they have to shift how they view you, it can either make them step up and say, yeah, I'm going to meet you there, or it's going to trigger something within them and say, I don't like this change. It's too abrupt. Like, and they'll say, oh, you've changed. Oh, you're different. Oh, I don't like the new you. And that has nothing to do with you. It really has nothing to do with you. It's just their perception of their world. It's their perception. When they see change, they freak out.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this in a past episode. I can't remember which episode it was now, but we were mentioning how often that's someone's reaction to like something inside of them, and like regret that they have because they didn't pursue their own goals. So it's not like we need to take it personally. Amanda, I do want to be conscious of the time, but there's some sort of quick fire questions I want to ask at the end here. The first one is, what do you wish you'd been told early in your 20s?
To trust myself more. I was looking for everyone else's advice instead of slowing down, taking a breath, and figuring out what is it that I actually wanted.
I love it. What is the greatest opportunity for quarter lifers today?
I think your greatest opportunity is to really focus on self-healing, really focus on self-love, and getting radically deeper on honesty and just owning who you are.
Cool. Okay, this next one's a little more complicated. What would I need to ask you for this to be the most important thing for 20-somethings to hear, and how would you answer that?
How to start the process of self-forgiveness and decluttering your mindset. That would be the question.
I actually had that written down here, but I was like focusing more on relationships. Like, I know you mentioned you went through a lot of like forgiveness and some inner work. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So how would you answer that?
Okay, so I have this journal, and it's not a new concept. A lot of coaches talk about this, but I have this journal that I carry around with me, and it's 2 columns, and so anytime I have a negative thought, I get triggered by something, I get upset over something, like I get angry over something, I just write it down. So I write down that thought, and then on the opposite side, in the other column, I replace it with something more empowering, more supportive, more affirming, maybe like a mantra or affirmation. And I just keep doing that. I keep digging and seeing what pops up. And it's going to make you feel spiritually hungover. You're going to just be like, I can't doing this anymore. But it's going to create a shift in you because you're not going to hold space for that anymore. It's a refusal of your old bullshit story. It is an absolute.
Yeah, I'm all for actionable tips, so thank you for sharing that. Amanda, I've got one more question, but before I get to that, where can people get in touch with you if they want to check out what you're doing? And feel free to mention any projects or things like that you have coming up as well.
Yeah, so you can go to amandarivera.co. That's where you can find out more about my signature 3-month coaching program, Thought Leader Academy. You could look at courses and new products and offerings that I'll be putting up there. And you could also check out Millennial Thought Leaders Mastermind, which is my Facebook group. That's where the heart of
the
everything
magic happens.
that's where the magic is happening. And I really feel it's an incubator to turn entrepreneurs into thought leaders.
Yeah, and you'll see my face up there too. I love the group. It's like you mentioned like surrounding yourself with people doing big things, and that's exactly how I feel with that group. From the moment I joined, like I got all these messages like, you're going to love it here and welcome to the group, and it's really cool. So thank you for providing that space, and I can't recommend it highly enough to people listening. Before I get to the final question, I just want to acknowledge you, Amanda, for coming on today and sharing a bit about your story so vulnerably. And also for having that moment with the tragedy in your life in your early 20s and realizing like, this is not how I'm going to make the biggest difference in the world, and making that shift and now helping other people do the same thing. So I just want to acknowledge you for that. And the final question that I have is, what one thing can listeners do this week to start creating their own quarter life comeback?
Get out there and reach out to someone who scares you.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah. Worst comes to worst, even if they don't respond, you did something that most people wouldn't do.
I really like that. Amanda Rivera, thank you so much for coming on the Quarter Life Comeback.
Sweet. Thank you for having me here. This was so much fun.
Yeah, bye. So there you have it, guys and girls. That wraps up this week's episode of the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, episode 38. And a big thanks once again to Amanda Rivera for coming on the Quarter Life Comeback and sharing her wisdom and her story with all of us. If you like this episode, make sure you share it around with your friends and shoot me a tweet at Brian Tier to let me know some of your biggest takeaways. For me, I just want to stress again Amanda's one thing you can do this week of reaching out to someone who scares you. I promise it's not as scary as you think it might be. Now, as always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in the show at bryantier.com/038. And if you like this, I want to get more episodes as well as other exclusive stuff, go to quarterlifecomeback.com and sign up on that page. Thanks for joining me once again this week, and until next time, keep creating your quarter life comeback.
Thanks for listening to the Quarter Life Comeback. Get started today by visiting bryantier.com.